Good evening or good morning, David, and all non-Portuguese speakers. Can you hear me? Probably not. Well, if you can hear me, I would just like to welcome you first. It's a great joy to have David with us. And I'd like to just let you know that they are just finishing the technical things at the temple, and we're going to start in a few minutes. So yes, thank you for joining us today.
Recording in progress.
Noite. Sogra do atividade. Seu no YouTube. Vai gravar a atividade localmente, depois a gente vai subir, né? Mas independente disso, para nós é um dia, é um momento muito especial da gente conseguir fazer essa atividade no dia de hoje. Ela, num certo sentido, inicia um ciclo bonito, sim, virtuoso também de aprofundamento, de contato, de conexão, de aprofundamento da Sangha como um todo, né? Especialmente aqui no Brasil, com a participação do professor David Loy. Então, A atividade de hoje, ela faz parte de um conjunto de diálogos que vem ocorrendo já há um tempo, que a gente chama de diálogos de budismo e sociedade, que o Lama Santen tem continuamente oferecido e contemplado diferentes temas que são completamente atuais e ao mesmo tempo se pergunta como que o budismo ajuda a entender e aprofundar esses temas. Então, o professor David Loy é uma pessoa perfeita para a gente convidar e para a gente também enriquecer a nossa
So, Professor David Law is a perfect person for us to invite and to help us and enrich our vision. So, our today's activity is the beginning of this cycle of activities. It's still happening in an online format, but very soon Professor David will be in Brazil, and we're gonna have a tournée in Brazil, visiting different communities, different sanghas, different projects, and checking all this project and all these things that sangha is doing in different places. It will be a very wonderful moment to see our sangha spread all over the country, discussing very contemporary and very necessary topics. So it's going to be a very rich experience, and it's starting in São Paulo on April 1st. And then we're going to go to Brasília, Alto Paraíso, Paraná, and eventually we're going to conclude with a retreat here at this very temple with Lama Sante in Corpus Christi holiday. So as not to steal more time, I would like to introduce today's activity and also explain who is here, introduce the people who are here. So Professor David Loy. I have to check my notes. He's a Zen teacher, activist, sociologist, and founder of Ecodharma Center of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. A prolific writer, his work has been using the Buddhist understanding of emptiness to analyze the history of West and the global contemporary problems. David Loy is engaged in different groups, including Extinction Rebellion and Zen Peacemakers. So thank you very much and very welcome here. And since we started with the online presentation, there are also the people who have somehow helped publishing this book, David Loy's book here in Brazil, Ecodharma. So today we have with us Venerable Chorain and Isabel Vale. So Isabel Vale has graduation in business. She's a doctor in psychosociologist of communities by Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's been working in the publishing market in Brazil for more than 30 years, and she's the publisher of Bangual Editora, which publishes books about global transition. She's also a yoga instructor, bodily therapist, and she likes to walk barefoot in forests. And I'd also like to invite Venerable Chorain, a Zen nun. So she has a business degree from USP, and she studied in the United States later on. She practiced Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, for many years, and she even lived in Dharamsala, India. And then eventually she changed it to the Zen tradition, where she was ordained in Los Angeles. As a nun, she concluded her course in Center for Council and also in other institutions. She translated the book The Six Perfections of her Tibetan master, Geshe Sonam, and also the books O Zen da Pessoa Comum and Ecodharma. So welcome.
Budismo. Em 82, praticou na Associação Zen Internacional do mestre Zen Taisen Deshimaru. Ele recebeu os preceitos do mestre Narasaki Hiroshi e também do mestre Daigyo Moriyama Roshi. Traduziu obras do budismo como o Sutra da Plataforma, o Ensinamento Zen de Bodhidharma, o Zen da Pessoa Comum e a Kodharma, os dois últimos em parceria com a monja Choren. E ele foi um dos fundadores da revista Bodhisattva e também da associação Via Zen. Em 2018, ele recebeu a transmissão do Dharma da mestra Koen Roshi. Então, uma alegria ter mais uma vez o monge Ichin Sensei conosco. E, claro, num certo sentido, a grande inspiração para a gente também estar aqui, isso tudo está acontecendo no nosso Numa Santen, né? Que, num certo sentido, une todas as pontas disso e ajuda a gente a inspirar a Sangha, a mover essas discussões todas que enriquecem a nossa vida, né? E junto dessas pessoas que eu também...
And together with all these people that I just introduced, we also have the voices that will be supporting today's activity. So translating David Loy from English to Portuguese, Carol Souza will be supporting us, and she's somewhere in Asia. I don't know if in Nepal or India. She's an experienced translator in the Sangha who has been working for many years and supporting the Sangha with translations and other teachers in many ways. So Carol today is doing the translation from English to Portuguese. And also we have with us, who's translating from Portuguese into English, Mariana, who's going to be here with us very soon. She's also a very dear practitioner here in the Sangha. She lives in the US, and she has generously offered to help. And she's constantly attending the study cycles and retreats. And she's now translating from Portuguese into English. She's going to be here soon. So these are the voices that will be helping us today.
A gente podia perguntar qual a linhagem do Buda, né? O Buda veio num tempo que não tinha as linhagens ainda, ele era o próprio Buda, né? Isso é muito maravilhoso, a gente sempre poder pensar que, enfim, todas as linhagens são a linhagem do Buda.
And it's very interesting to think that all lineages are Buddha's lineage. All sanghas are Sangha, Buddha Sangha. And today we're going to discuss this very crucial topic, which is this emergency, this climate emergency. And also this threat, this view of the end of the world that Lutzenberger in the past, he also used to discuss this and very clearly. And this is something that has been very well worked and researched by Professor David Loy, who's going to be sharing some of his thoughts with us now regarding this union between the social perspective and the Buddhist perspective. And also how can we, based on the contemplations from Buddhism, how we can change our way of acting in the world, how we can transform this action into a spiritual practice, and how to transform this into a practice of protection, of reflecting about ecological and social issues. This is very challenging and also very wonderful. And naturally, there are some apparent contradictions. That is, we think we need to silence in order to go deeper within, but at the same time, we have this challenging
So
of
we have
looking
this
outside.
challenge of,
And so in the
I mean,
Buddhist perspective,
I
we
hope you
have
guys
an
can hear me.
aspiration, or actually we live in a
So
dream,
we are in this
and
world of
there are
a
many
dream world, and for
dream-like
us to move
inhabitants
ourselves
around
through
us,
this
but
world
still
with a
we
dream
need
body and
to
search for us
act.
with a
We need
more
to work on the
favorable
action
view,
level,
not only
and we
for
need to
all humans, but
create
all
benefit
humans
for
in general.
this
So here in
dream-like
Sabi,
being.
we've been facing this matter
So here
for a
in
long
Sebi, we
time
have
right
been
now.
thinking about these things for a
And
very long time.
what we can effectively
And what we
understand,
can actually understand within all this is
if
that
we practice the 5 vows morality, or called Pankasila as well, as the laymen do their vows, the world can change a lot. So Buddha himself advised different kings, and also using Pankasila's vows to reflect upon how is the social development, how is the situation of a kingdom. He would be able to offer reference to the kings themselves of how to improve the kingdom situation. So I think this is very wonderful, no, very notable, how we can convert these teachings and make them appear in the environmental situations and the social situations as well. So if we practice in a more perfect way the vows of to not kill, to not rob, to not practice improper sex, to not lie, to not intoxicate ourselves, will improve considerably the situation in general. It is okay that this is a very important reflection. On the other hand, even though that we diagnose this and look at this way, we have the necessity to develop a certain level of ability for these visions to become not also a social vision, not only a vision of people. So we face this difficulty, how these consciousness, how this awareness can become a collective awareness. How can that happen? Which methods can we use for that? So we as Sabi, we have this challenge that we've been using this method of mandalas. We sit down in a circle, we contemplate collectively, we think about the positive aspects of our actions and how we can amplify that. So contemplating how the mind of samsara established itself through the eighth consciousness, we try to nourish the eighth consciousness and appear inside this world of a better dream, a favorable dream. In the language of the Buddha, this is described as the Pure Lands. So as we look in a more subtle way, in a deeper way, this dream world that we live in, we can dream better worlds that become unifying dreams of different people. When we dream this way, we have a birth that it corresponds to the seventh consciousness that substitutes the identities and conditionings that in general we are unaware of it, and determines the movement of our sixth consciousness, which is the usual mind. The sixth consciousness, it determines what the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and mind sees and localize that. So essentially, the sixth consciousness determines what we see, and therefore, what are we going to do inside of this world? Considering that this is this conditioning through the seventh and eighth consciousness. So the vision of the dreams starts living in the eighth consciousness, and this becomes a way to relate with the other people that have the same dreams, that get inside this dream and converge in this dream. So this is the process. So it's almost like our disposition, this possibility for us to see down in so many different groups and dream what's going on. What is going on, what is the best things that is going on, and how we can amplify that and make it more positive. So this vision of Buddha, it's a very old ancient visions, and it kind of gets lost in the world. It's a speech that it's pre-Buddhism, that remotes to the traditions of these different people that came before the so we have this challenge of us to find in the subtle level and dream pure lands and try to find the ways to execute that. So I think that as Buddhist practitioners, as Sangha, we have this challenge, this collective challenge, that is to deepen our practice, to make our practice more clear, overcome essentially the 5 obstacles that transform our actions in actions that are sometimes very negative. And at the same time, dream the pure lands that there are the places where we start living in, the subtle places that we start living in. A good example of a pure land is the Dharma centers, where different sanghas organize themselves and dream and do good things. So when we are in a place like that, it is natural that we will appear as identities. They are connected to this place itself. So what we do and not do, it naturally organizes itself and walks towards a better direction. So this is the principle of the mandalas, of the illusory world. So these reality bubbles, worlds, they are dreamed, and we naturally operate inside this dream world, as Buddha described himself. So we need better dreams. These current dreams are effectively threatening the life in the planet. So I am doing this brief introduction here just to stimulate the other ones, or the other speakers here, and also say welcome to David Loy here, that will eventually do his speech and bring his knowledge and share with us.
Thank you, Lama Samten. First of all, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, good. So if I understand correctly, is it a good opportunity to reflect on what you've just said, Lama Samten? Do I understand the situation? I appreciate that Lama Samten began by
Agora
talking
seria o momento
about...
para Pro David Eloy falar.
Right now would be the moment for David Lloyd to bring his contribution.
Got it. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you for the introduction and the remarks. I'm very grateful to be able to join you this evening. And I'm also, of course, even more grateful to have this opportunity to visit your country starting in about, well, less than 2 weeks now. Let me ask, should I pause for a while after a short comment and allow for the translation? Is that the best way to proceed? Would the interpreter like me to pause, or should I
I
just go
think
ahead?
so soon. I think that would be, yes.
Okay, good.
We can hear you very well. We hear David, and we are having a consecutive translation. So as Professor David speaks a little bit, so he opens up the space for our Portuguese translation to happen. I don't think that he's listening he's being able to hear our translator, our Portuguese translator, but as you stop, she's translating for us.
It sounds good. Somebody might need to let me know when the translation is finished, so I know when to start again.
Okay.
I appreciate that Lama Samten began by talking about the climate crisis because clearly that is the most urgent ecological problem that we face today. I'm pausing. At the same time, I actually don't like to talk about the climate crisis because I think it's important not to distinguish that too sharply from a much larger ecological crisis that we face today. In other words, I think we can say the climate crisis is just the tip of a much larger ecological iceberg that also includes a species extinction event, the fact that so many plant and animal species are now disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked to read recently that for every 5 wild animals that were existing back in 1970, today there are only 2. Today we have only 40% of the wild animals that existed just 50 or so years ago. And in addition to that, of course, we're aware of many different types of toxic pollutants in the air, in the sea, in the earth, in our bodies. And I'm sure every one of us can think of other examples, many other examples of ecological problems. But even that, I think.
Just a minute, Professor. Can she speak? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Sure. I think I need a signal to know when to start again.
Her name is Carolina Souza. Caroline Souza. She's with a green shirt. You may see with a green background too. So you may know when she stops speaking.
I
Let
don't
me
see
see
any
if,
green background right now.
oh, you don't, oh, I'm sorry. So I tell you then. So she stopped speaking now, so she's ready, I guess.
Okay. Even the ecological crisis, I think, is only part of the larger poly crisis that we have today. Hi, Carolyn. Now I see you. Great. A few years ago, Noam Chomsky, the very important American professor, social critic, he said that he said something that I think about almost every day that I think is truly shocking, something that we need to remember. Chomsky said that right now is the most dangerous time in human history. Wow, why did he say that? Um, he offered three reasons. The first was, in fact, the climate crisis, which in fact is even bigger, as I just said, even more of a problem than climate. He also talked about the danger of nuclear war. And frankly, that I think is something much more in our consciousness now than a few years ago when Chomsky spoke. The danger of nuclear war, and also the rise of authoritarianism, the decline of democracy in many places around the world, or the threats to democracy in many places around the world.
Ele também falou sobre a guerra nuclear, que obviamente hoje em dia é um problema que está muito mais nas nossas mentes do que estava na época em que o Chomsky falou isso. E o outro problema que ele mencionou foi a ascensão do autoritarianismo, né, e o declínio da democracia em muitos lugares ao redor do mundo.
So today, many people are actually talking about what some people are calling the poly crisis, that we don't just have one crisis, but poly meaning many. We have a number of crises that are interacting with each other at the same time.
Então, hoje muitas pessoas falam em policrise, né? Que não é só uma crise, mas que são muitas crises em diferentes lugares que estão interagindo umas com as outras ao mesmo tempo.
Just to cite one more, I think we also have an economic crisis in the sense of the enormous and still growing gap between rich and poor, right? So today, for example, we have a growing number of billionaires, and yet at the same time, there's a general impoverishment going on, both here in the United States and I think worldwide. The fact that there are so many poor people now who are unable to keep up with inflation at the same time that the billionaires are thriving.
Então, para mencionar mais um desses problemas, a gente pode falar da crise econômica, né? Que a gente tem, então, uma distância cada vez maior entre pobres e ricos, a gente tem um número cada vez maior de bilionários, e ao mesmo tempo existe um empobrecimento geral acontecendo não só aqui nos Estados Unidos, mas no mundo inteiro. Então, muitas pessoas pobres que estão se vendo incapazes de lidar com a inflação ao mesmo tempo.
I emphasize this because I think it's really important to realize what faces us today is not simply the challenge of shifting to renewable sources of energy. People might say, if we can just do that quickly enough, then the kind of economy, the kind of society that we have today, we can go on as we have been. And I think that is a very big mistake.
E eu estou enfatizando isso porque eu acho que é muito importante a gente perceber que o que a gente está enfrentando hoje não é simplesmente uma coisa que pode ser resolvida usando fontes de energia renováveis, né? Que a gente não vai simplesmente fazer isso e aí rapidamente o tipo de economia, o tipo de sociedade que a gente tem pode seguir do jeito que está se a gente só partir para fontes renováveis. É um grande engano pensar dessa forma.
What we have today is a now worldwide civilization, more interconnected and interdependent than ever before. A now worldwide civilization that has lost its way. In fact, I think it's fair to say it is a worldwide civilization that is in the process of self-destructing. Many things seem to be falling apart at the same time.
O que a gente tem agora é uma civilização completamente global, uma coisa que a gente não tinha há muito pouco tempo atrás. A gente tem uma civilização mais interconectada e mais interdependente do que nunca. E eu penso que essa civilização global, ela está se perdendo um pouco. Eu acho que é justo dizer que nessa nossa civilização global existe um processo de autodestruição e a gente está vendo as coisas se desmancharem, colapsarem.
There are many aspects to this worldwide crisis. I mean, we could focus on the political side, the economic side, other social aspects. But I think it's essential to realize, and this is where our Buddhist traditions come in, it's essential to realize that this poly crisis is also a spiritual crisis. It has to do with the foundations of our relationship with each other and also our fundamental relationship with the earth.
Então, tem muitos aspectos nessa crise, a gente pode focar no lado econômico, no lado político ou social, mas eu acho que o que é essencial é a gente perceber, principalmente na nossa tradição budista, que essa é uma crise espiritual, né? Que as bases, as fundações dos nossos relacionamentos entre si e com os outros, elas estão em crise, elas estão sofrendo.
It's also a challenge for Buddhism. Buddhism began in Iron Age India some 2,400 years ago, and the problems that people faced then are very different from the kinds of problems that we face today. And that's important to realize because it means we can't simply return to Buddhist texts and traditional teachings and expect to find specific answers because they're simply not there.
Também uma crise do próprio budismo, assim, porque o budismo foi fundado na Índia há cerca de 2.500 anos atrás, na Idade do Ferro, e os problemas que as pessoas enfrentavam naquela época eram muito diferentes dos problemas que as pessoas enfrentam hoje em dia. A gente precisa entender que não é simplesmente a gente abrir um livro de ensinamentos tradicionais budistas e a gente vai encontrar todas as respostas que a gente precisa exatamente para esse tempo.
Nonetheless, there are many important implications of traditional Buddhist teachings that we can explore and tease out today. And that's, I think, the most important aspect of Ecodharma.
Ao mesmo tempo, tem muitas importantes implicações desses ensinamentos budistas tradicionais que a gente pode explorar hoje. E eu penso que esse é o aspecto mais importante do Ecodharma.
From the very beginning, Buddhism has emphasized impermanence. We could say that impermanence is so important that the world we live in, it's not a collection of separate things, but in fact it's really a confluence of processes. And those processes include you and me.
Para começar, então, o budismo ensinou sobre a impermanência. E aí eu vejo, né, que o mundo que a gente vê hoje não é só uma coleção de coisas separadas, mas é, na verdade, uma confluência de processos, e esses processos incluem vocês e eu.
And it's important to realize that those impermanent processes also include Buddhism itself, right? Buddhism is impermanent. We see that in the way that it has transformed every time it's gone to a new culture. So, for example, when Buddhism went to China, Mahayana Buddhism interacted with the native traditions, Confucianism, and especially Taoism. And that created Chan or Zen Buddhism. And the same thing in Tibet, of course. When Tantric Buddhism went to Tibet, it interacted with the native Bon tradition and created what we now know as Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism.
E a gente também precisa perceber que o budismo é também um desses processos impermanentes. Então, o budismo ele está sempre mudando, está sempre se transformando ao longo do tempo. A gente pode ver, por exemplo, quando o budismo foi para a China e interagiu com as tradições locais, com o daoísmo, com o confucionismo, e surgiu uma forma mahayana específica do budismo chinês. A mesma coisa aconteceu quando o budismo foi para o Tibete, interagiu com as tradições locais, principalmente com o Bon, que eventualmente deu origem ao budismo tibetano, né, como a gente conhece hoje.
I think it's fair to say that Buddhism faces its greatest challenge ever as it comes not just to the West, but to the modern world in general, a world that is in large part very secular. The ways of thinking and living are very secular, but also a world of preoccupied with this poly crisis that I mentioned.
Eu acho que agora é justo dizer que o budismo está enfrentando talvez a maior crise que ele já enfrentou, não só em relação ao mundo ocidental, mas em relação ao mundo como um todo, porque grande parte do mundo hoje em dia está cada vez mais secular, tem uma forma secular de pensar. E a gente também está tendo que lidar com essas questões dessa policrise que eu mencionei agora há pouco.
Within Asia, there were a number of constraints on the way that the Buddhist tradition developed, right? None of the traditional Asian Buddhist cultures was democratic. That meant that Buddhism had a kind of a problem. From the beginning, Buddhism as a small cult, it wanted state support, but also it needed toleration. So it had to be very careful not to antagonize the kings and the emperors.
Então, dentro da Ásia, principalmente naquela época, havia muitas restrições, porque aquelas culturas elas não eram exatamente democráticas. Então, o budismo precisava ser muito cuidadoso para não entrar em antagonismo com o Estado. Então, ao mesmo tempo em que o budismo queria ter apoio estatal, ele precisava ter esse cuidado e, por vezes, acabava se transformando numa espécie de culto.
That meant that the social implications of Buddhist teachings about dukkha, suffering, the cause of suffering, how to end suffering, the social implications, the communal, collective implications could not be fully developed in that kind of context. Instead, Buddhism focused on individual transformation, not social transformation. It encouraged us to go within and work on our own individual enlightenment, but traditionally it did not encourage so much looking at what we might call social dukkha, the dukkha caused by social, economic, political institutions.
Isso significou, então, que as implicações sociais dos ensinamentos budistas sobre o sofrimento, sobre como extinguir o sofrimento, dukkha, impermanência, etc., elas não puderam ser plenamente desenvolvidas por causa dessas restrições. Então, como resultado disso, o budismo acabou focando muito mais numa transformação individual, né, nos encorajando a trabalhar para a nossa iluminação individual e não nos encorajando muito naquilo que eu poderia chamar de um engajamento político, social ou institucional com base nos ensinamentos budistas.
It's interesting that something like the opposite occurred in Europe, in the West. If we look at the history of Western civilization, we can see that the focus has been on social transformation rather than individual. If we trace back Western civilization to Greece, the emphasis on democracy, and more recently, the emphasis on changing the way that society is structured with laws, sometimes with revolutions. But it's a striking contrast with Buddhism, whereas the West has focused on what we might call social transformation, Buddhism historically has focused on individual personal transformation. And it's really interesting and important that right now, these two emphases, these two different ways of working for freedom, that these two are meeting. And we're in a situation where they need to work together. I hope that's not too long, Carolyn.
Ok. Então, uma coisa meio oposta aconteceu na Europa, na civilização ocidental, na história da civilização ocidental. A gente pode ver que havia um foco na transformação social. Então, se a gente na transformação social em vez desse foco no indivíduo. Então, se a gente volta, por exemplo, para a democracia grega, a gente vê, né, várias noções, vários conceitos, né, e esse esforço de transformar a sociedade por meio da criação de leis e, por vezes, por meio de revoluções. E o que é interessante que está acontecendo agora é que a gente está vendo que esses dois opostos, eles parecem estar se encontrando nesse momento. Eles estão vendo essas duas diferentes formas de abordar a liberdade, elas estão se encontrando agora e estão vendo essa necessidade de ter que trabalhar juntas.
This meeting and this interaction with the Western tradition, with the European tradition, I think it's really important because it opens up new possibilities for Buddhism. It allows us to question, is it sufficient to focus on our own individual liberation, or does this imply new possibilities, not just new possibilities, but actually absolutely essential possibilities that we need to develop and explore today if we are going to respond appropriately to the kind of poly crisis that we are facing today.
Então, esse encontro ele é muito interessante, né? O budismo, então, encontrando as tradições europeias, a tradição ocidental, isso oferece uma oportunidade para o próprio budismo se abrir e se perguntar. Então, é suficiente pensar nesse foco na liberação individual? Ou será que é possível abrir, pensar em desenvolver e explorar formas coletivas que vão responder de forma apropriada às crises e à policrise que a gente está enfrentando hoje em dia?
I'm not sure how much longer I should be talking right now, so I'll stop in a moment. But let me just highlight two implications of the Buddhist teachings that I think are especially important and that will be coming up, I think, during my visit to Brazil. These are two implications that I think we need to explore, to think about together at some length.
Então, eu acho que o meu tempo já está acabando, mas eu quero explorar só duas implicações importantes dos ensinamentos budistas, que eu acho que vão ser muito importantes, né, para o tópico que a gente está discutindo, e também durante a minha visita no Brasil, eu penso que a gente vai explorar muito, e vai ser importante a gente sentar e conversar sobre isso juntos.
The first implication has to do with this extraordinary parallel I see between what the Buddhist traditions have always said about our individual problem, our individual predicament, and our collective predicament today in relationship to the earth.
Então, a primeira implicação tem a ver com esse paralelo extraordinário entre o que a tradição budista diz sobre o nosso problema, sobre esse nosso desafio, esse nosso problema individual, e esse desafio coletivo, esse problema coletivo que a gente está enfrentando hoje, em relação a diferentes questões.
We can say that at the heart, at the source, core of our individual dukkha suffering is the fundamental delusion of separation. The separation where there's a me that's separate from you, and that therefore my well-being is separate from your well-being. And of course, Buddhism teaches us that this is fundamentally a delusion, a delusion that causes suffering, that in fact we're not separate from each other at all.
Então, eu penso que no coração, na essência, no cerne do nosso sofrimento individual, dukkha, tá essa delusão entre que há uma separação entre eu e aquilo lá fora, o você. Então, essa delusão, ela dá origem ao pensamento de que o meu bem-estar, ele é separado do bem-estar, do seu bem-estar ou do bem-estar dos outros, e que também é mais importante. Então, é claro que o budismo nos ensina que isso é uma coisa que nos causa um sofrimento mental e que a gente não está sofrendo de forma individual, mas que há uma interconexão.
So traditionally, Buddhism has emphasized this individual problem, this sense of separation. But I think it's important to see how our larger ecological crisis today is actually just a larger version of the same thing, that we as a species, as a now worldwide civilization, we feel separate from the rest of the earth. And because of that, we feel that the earth is there just for us to use. And fundamentally, that our own well-being, in some sense, is separate from that of the earth. The ecological crisis is basically the result of that. It's helping us cut through the delusion that our own collective well-being can be understood as separate from the well-being of the whole earth.
Então, o budismo ele sempre enfatizou essa perspectiva do sofrimento individual baseado nessa separação, nesse dualismo entre eu e o outro. Mas é interessante a gente perceber que esse desafio que a gente está enfrentando hoje parece ser uma repercussão coletiva dessa mesma visão, desse mesmo sofrimento de separação, que nós, enquanto civilização, a gente se vê como separado do resto da Terra, do resto da natureza. E a gente entende que a gente está sob essa delusão de que o nosso bem-estar ele é separado do bem-estar, né, do resto do planeta, do resto da natureza.
That delusion of separation, the parallel between the individual and the collective sense of separation, that's very important. But actually, I think the single most important thing that the Buddhist tradition has to offer us is a little different. I think it's the Bodhisattva path. But sometimes I say the new Bodhisattva path or the Ecosattva path, because I think we need to understand it today in a somewhat different way.
Então, essa delusão da separação entre o eu e o outro, né, é muito importante, né, esse paralelo entre a delusão individual da separação e essa delusão coletiva é muito importante, mas o que eu penso que é o ponto crucial, mais importante, assim, para a gente pensar dos ensinamentos budistas, desculpa, gente, eu acabei me perdendo um pouquinho.
Acho que é o Ecosattva que substitui o
Isso,
Bodhisattva.
é o caminho do Bodhisattva. O caminho do Bodhisattva. E que esse é o ponto mais importante.
Que se torna o Ecosattva.
Isso. E que o David pensa que hoje, então, esse caminho ele precisa sofrer uma alteração para se adaptar aos tempos. Então, a gente tem a noção do Ecosattva.
Bodhisattvas follow a double path or a two-sided path. On the one side, they continue to work on their own, with their own personal practice, their own individual waking up, but they also know that that is insufficient, that they're also fully engaged in the world, in doing and offering what they can to alleviate the suffering of the world. And they realize that these two paths are not really separate from each other, but they reinforce each other.
Então, os bodhisattvas, eles percorrem um caminho duplo. Por um lado, eles estão focando nessa questão do sofrimento individual e da liberação individual, mas ao mesmo tempo eles percebem que isso por si só não é suficiente, então eles se envolvem plenamente com o mundo para aliviar o sofrimento do mundo. E eles percebem que essas duas coisas, na verdade, elas não são separadas, mas elas se reforçam uma outra.
Traditionally, the compassion of the bodhisattva often or usually it focuses on helping individuals. For example, Buddhist teachers helping their students wake up. But I think today we need to realize that the bodhisattva path has to find ways to address our collective institutional problems. What I mean by that is Buddhism, as we know, traditionally focuses on the three poisons: greed, ill will, and delusion. And I think it's important for us to see that today those three poisons have become institutionalized.
Tradicionalmente, a compaixão do Bodhisattva, ela focava em ajudar indivíduos específicos, né? Então, a gente tem essa noção dos professores, ajudando os alunos, os discípulos específicos. Mas o que eu acho que é importante hoje é a gente perceber que esse caminho tem que encontrar formas de se dirigir, de debater com problemas institucionais, problemas coletivos. Então, tradicionalmente, o budismo ele foca nos três venenos, né? A gente tem os três venenos como base do sofrimento individual, mas o que eu vejo, o que eu percebo no mundo de hoje, é que a gente pode falar, talvez, dessa delusão desses três venenos num nível institucionalizado, como algo institucionalizado, esses três venenos.
For example, if the first poison, greed, if greed means you never have enough, you always want more, well, frankly, I think that's a pretty good description of our economic system, late capitalism. Think about that growing gap between rich and poor that I referred to earlier.
Então, por exemplo, começando pela ganância, se a gente pensar que a ganância significa que a gente pensa que a gente nunca tem suficiente, que a gente sempre quer mais, bom, eu penso que essa é uma descrição muito boa do nosso sistema econômico atual. Então, a gente pode pensar, né, do nosso sistema capitalista atual. A gente pode pensar, então, nessa distância cada vez maior entre pobres e ricos que a gente vê hoje no mundo.
The second poison, ill will, it seems to me in the modern world, one of the ways that's coming out very powerfully is in our militarism and in the kinds of horrible military activities that are occurring right now. I can't speak for Brazil, but here in the United States, I believe the United States spends about half of all the money in the world that is devoted to military. Money that could otherwise be used to help people. In fact, we're spending that money to create, to buy, and to use weapons, right? We live in an increasingly militarized world, which is, I think, an institutionalized example of the second poison, ill will.
Então, o segundo veneno, a má vontade, eu acho que nesse nosso mundo moderno ele está se manifestando como essa militarização horrível que a gente está vendo acontecer, né, por todos os lados. Então, eu não posso falar da situação do Brasil, mas aqui nos Estados Unidos, por exemplo, a gente vê isso numa grande medida. Metade do dinheiro que é gastado no mundo inteiro para fins militares, ele é dos Estados Unidos, ele vem dos Estados Unidos. Então, para comprar armas, para militarização e etc., guerras. Então, eu acho que esse é um bom exemplo da institucionalização do segundo veneno, a má vontade.
And the third poison, delusion. Do we have collective institutionalized delusion? I think that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Actually, one thing I would emphasize is the role of advertising. The whole point of that being to keep persuading us that the next thing we buy will make us happy. It encourages a certain kind of consumerist mindset. That's one example of institutionalized delusion. But of course, we know about the media, right? The media, which are often profit making. Here in the US, I think about Fox News is a really good example of that, but also we're familiar with government propaganda. All of these need to be seen as important examples of collective institutionalized delusion. And we have to understand this, and we have to understand that today we are challenged in our practice, in our bodhisattva activity, to work together to find ways to address this institutionalized greed, institutionalized ill will, and institutionalized delusion. It's essential that we do that. Sorry, Carolyn, I went on a little long.
It's okay. E aí a gente tem, claro, o terceiro veneno, que é a delusão. Então, será que a gente pode pensar numa forma institucionalizada, coletiva de delusão no nosso mundo hoje em dia? Aí, com certeza, eu acho que é muito possível a gente fazer um paralelo entre a delusão e a publicidade, né? Advertisement no nosso mundo hoje. Então, o ponto principal, né, o objetivo principal da publicidade é nos persuadir de que a próxima coisa que a gente comprar, ela vai, enfim, nos fazer felizes. Então, tem toda essa mentalidade consumista que é incentivada por meio da publicidade, né? Então, aqui, posso pensar, por exemplo, nos Estados Unidos, a gente também pode falar da mídia. A mídia também cumpre esse papel como uma forma institucionalizada da delusão no nosso mundo. Aqui nos Estados Unidos, eu posso pensar, por exemplo, na Fox News, etc. Tem muitos outros bons exemplos. Então, essa é a forma institucionalizada da delusão no nosso mundo. E eu acho que é muito importante a gente entender que hoje em dia a gente está desafiados, confrontados a encontrar formas enfim, lidar com essas questões dessa institucionalização dos três venenos. Então, a ganância, a má vontade e a delusão.
So these are a few examples of the kinds of things that I'll be talking about, but not just me, that we will be talking about together and discussing during some of the events, presentations during my visit, and I really look forward to sharing and learning from each other there. But I also want to emphasize on the other side that although I don't know a great deal about the situation of Buddhism in Brazil, I'm really very interested, in fact, really excited to learn more, and also to learn more about some of the kinds of communities that have been developing, because I think there are some really interesting and potentially very important models that I think have sprung up that are really trying to live the Buddhist Dharma in terms of how people live together collectively, how they work together, how they support themselves. So I see my visit as an opportunity to share what I've been thinking about and to discuss it, but also to learn more about what Brazil has to offer. I really get the sense there's a very, very vibrant Buddhist world there, and that it's important for those of us here in the U.S. and other places become more aware of what's going on in your country.
Então, esses são alguns exemplos de alguns assuntos que a gente vai estar discutindo nesses próximos dias e na minha visita ao Brasil. Eu espero compartilhar mais um pouco sobre isso, mas não só eu, vocês também, a gente conversar todo mundo e trocar ideias. Outra coisa também que eu estou muito empolgado e muito entusiasmado é em conhecer essas comunidades, né, que estão espalhadas pelo Brasil, essas comunidades budistas. Eu não sei muito sobre a situação do budismo no Brasil, mas eu tenho muito interesse em aprender mais e também aprender mais sobre o potencial dessas comunidades que estão sendo desenvolvidas aí, porque eu penso, eu sinto que elas são bons exemplos de como os ensinamentos e a visão budista permeia, né, essa nossa atividade em meio ao mundo. E eu acho que é importante que nós, aqui nos Estados Unidos e em outros países, que a gente olhe para isso, que a gente converse, que a gente troque ideias. E eu acho que isso poderia ser um bom exemplo, talvez para outros lugares também, né, essas comunidades. Então, eu espero que a gente possa trocar muitas ideias e eu possa aprender também muito com vocês.
I think this is a good place to pause. As a retired professor, I can go on indefinitely for hours, right? We have our captive students who have to listen to us. And in truth, I don't know whether I've talked too long or too short, but in any case, there will be much more opportunity in the coming weeks to, talk about these issues at great length. Uh, for the moment, I'm not quite sure where we're going to go from here, but I do want to really emphasize my gratitude to Carolyn. Um, as I like to say, translators work twice as hard as the speaker, right? If you think about it. And so, thank you, Carolyn. She has to listen, and then she has to. And oh my goodness, being poor in languages myself, I can't imagine. But thank you, Carolyn.
Hum.
Então, o professor David falou que então ele acha que essa é um bom momento para ele parar, que como um professor aposentado ele pode seguir falando, 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 mas então que ele queria, e ele não sabe, ele está em dúvida se ele falou muito ou se ele falou pouco, mas ele queria usar essa oportunidade então para esses são alguns dos assuntos que a gente vai estar discutindo nas próximas semanas e dias. Ele queria usar essa oportunidade para agradecer todo mundo, especialmente a tradutora. Ele disse que a tradutora faz um trabalho duplo. Eu não concordo, mas enfim. E aí é isso. Então, professor, queria saber também como é que a gente vai seguir agora na conversa, no debate.
So I return the floor to the organizers, and am happy to follow up in any way you like. Just let me know.
Muito obrigado. Embora a gente tenha avançado um pouco no horário,
Advance a little bit in this hour. It would be very nice if we will be able to listen non-Chorin and Isabel and sharing, because besides cultivating these matters and deepening these matters in their practice, they also dedicated themselves for a long time towards the book and making these reflections here for ourselves. So I think that would be very nice if we take advantage of this time for each and every one of them, say some words of how these matters and the material of the text just touch their hearts. So I wish that, I don't know if Isabel or Chor and Monk is around here, they could say some words. Isabel, can you hear us? We can hear her. Can you hear me now? Okay, now yes. Okay, good. Such an honor being here and encounter you, Lama Padmasanta and David Loy and dear Chorin and dear Ching, dear Our last encounter was also online, right? So here I'm encountering you guys again. I'm not that well known in Buddhism, but I feel so relaxed with you guys, and I feel so happy with this invitation. So it's such an honor being here. So Bumblewell editor, it is editor for global editor. So it's not only with the Buddhist contents, we bring a series of different books and other series of teachings and philosophies. But how to not publish this book if the initial sentence, the prologue of this book already says the following. There is a good news and a bad news. The bad one. The civilization as we know, it is about to end. But now the good news. The civilization as we know, is ready to be over. So we are in a transition, right? I was just cite the author, Somi, excuse me, my pronunciation, also known as Stephen Barr. And so for sure, this book makes it is about what the humanity is going through, one that ceases and another one that appears. So this book as well, who contact me was Nan Chorin and Nishin. And I said, all right then, but I need to see the content. I will publish, but I need to see the content. And then when I looked the book, I started feeling very scared. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. This book is so hard to read. Because David brings us to put our feet on the ground and feet on the earth. If we go to the symbology of the earth element, sometimes earth it's very hard to deal with, but it is a shaking that we need to feel. We need to feel shaken this way. And in Bumblewell, and I believe that in the majority of the editors, we love to make books and put it what we believe in the world, but we feel so sorry when the people don't read the book, you guys. So I am saying here for you all that the beginning of the book, it is hard, but we do need to look with all of our strength through this beginning. When we get to chapter 6, David makes us breathe again, and he allows that we take a breath. And not that he invents these things, he just brings it up. Such a hardship that we are going through right now in the world. But so keep going on as you read the book. I need to say this for you guys to not give up. Get to chapter 6, where he brings us in a brilliant way. He brings our hope again. With Joanna Mace also inspire us. So this book also, the first person that David Lloyd dedicates, it is Joanna Mace. She is a dearest here in Bumblewell with the book Active Hope. Excuse me, I don't know, because she helps us to keep moving on actively. So this is also a call from David in this book. We need to act. And I wish to remember or to remind you guys that this hope, it is also Paulo Freire's hope. This is active hope. And why do I say that? Because I have this responsibility to publish as foreigners authors, and it seems like they are not in the Brazilian reality. So I feel worried about that. And for us to not be disconnected with the Brazilian reality, we bring in this book the Brazilian culture that we live here. So for this book, besides the counter book that it's written by Padma Sante, it was also written by Monk Cohen or Non Cohen and also Coho Monk. Excuse me. So they all wrote something in the book that it's an important part. So she's basically saying that that's was the things that she wanted to say, and also that she would like to bring 2 points here. So even though that is a book that brings Buddhist teachings, it also it is inside all of it brings to us to a spiritual development for your own spirituality. May that be a religious belief, may that be the spirituality that deals with profound ecology, with deep ecology. So this book goes inside of you. It is not only towards Buddhists, but all people who dedicate themselves to that. And another thing that David also brings up, because other masters that we have in humanity already do that, it is the following. Work yourself individually, but with the eye to the collective. The focus is still, with still the individual development. It's where we have this power. It is within us, but with the eyes in the collective, not forgetting that we are part of this collective, and that maybe Sangha, who is this community who embraces today, we may be able to comprehend that this Sangha, it is global. And that's why the individual work with a collective education. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So non-choring, thank you so much, Isabel. Also, let's turn the attention towards non-choring. She says, I'm here. Says, welcome. I wish to briefly appreciate this opportunity as well, to being here with all of you guys online. And also these coming of David Loy here, Professor David Loy here in Brazil. It's such a precious thing. It's so richness. And I wish to suggest an idea that occurred to me just now during our conversation, is that we would have another online encounter a little ahead, not right now, just not right after his visit. Let's let him to go back home, reflect a little bit and rest. And then for us to have another online encounter, for us maybe to do a little feedback for him to say after him coming here and knowing so much about Brazil and all these initiatives. Because my personal question for me and for him and for all the participants during this visit, all the other ones there will be able to be with him, it's this matter of how in a country as Brazil, as us Buddhists, if Buddhism can have a relevant role in a country that it's majority Christian, right? With a education that it's absurdly inexistent. I missed that word. And a population that is so vulnerable, majority so vulnerable, right? And so Christian, and each and every day more fundamentalist. So how do we? So this is a koan for me, a constant koan. How can we have an benefic effect? What is the Buddhist role inside these layers that it's most vulnerable of the population? And if we need to take the Buddhist clothes off, and then because these population doesn't have access, and we know that these sanghas are majority of white and privileged people, and privilege again, and etc. So here is my invitation, the reflection here, and who knows, with a conversation after this visit, that will be wonderful. So auspicious of the professor here in Brazil. Thank you so much. Wonderful, this idea. We'll note it. We'll definitely do this invitation and also take advantage of José Fonseca, Inching Monk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. To say some words for us. So first I would like to express my contentment to be, how happy I am to be here with all these people. And also take advantage of the first words from Lama, that he brought up the matter of the dream. Here we are living this dream. It is here in this place, but not only in this place. In many of the other places that we are right now. And this is something that is collective, and a new collective, a different collective that is still under construction. And speaking about dream and speaking about delusion, it seems to be something in the same field, but it is important that we see that it's not, right? There is the clear vision that separates completely the dream of the delusion, because it seems interesting that we can see the dream with a clear vision. We can see the dream with a clear vision, right? It's the clear vision that makes possible for us this dream. But we have a lot to say when Dr. David Loy come to Brazil. We'll talk about this book, this wonderful book, that it's that there was so much that we had so much effort that we put it through this book. Not me only, but Isabel and all these people. And if I could do an analogy between this book and a being that is alive, a live being, I would say that there is a molecule that carry the informations, right? And this molecule is the one who makes that this books work. All these interactions of this molecule depends on interactions like the proteins. Do you guys already guess that I am thinking about the DNA, right? So among many citations, many quotes, wonderful quotes that Professor David Loy collected to initiate each and every chapter of this book, that but by the way, it's not agreeing with, but speaking, as Isabel said, I don't think it is hard to read. I think it's easy to read. And I think that there is a lot of impact. It may scare us, but if we be able to overcome this fear, it is easy to read. But coming back to this analogy of the DNA and these citations, these wonderful quotes that Dr. David Loy collected in the sixth chapter, that Isabel had mentioned before, there is a citation of these big environmentalist Bill, excuse me, somebody asked him, what can I do as a individual? And he answers, stops being an individual. So these answer in a certain way, it's the DNA of this book, right? Inside this quote, we can find everything that is in here, as well as we can, through one teaching from Buddha, we can find all Buddha's teachings, right? But the matter of the individuality, excuse me, and this freedom that appears when we are able to let go of this individuality. It is something that it is part of our practice, and it is part of our search. This search that we have, there is this quality to bring, or also to push it away, our ego, ourself. And speaking about self, I think about selfishness. That thing that makes us, I always bring to myself this idea of individual. I am me. And it is very hard to let go selfishness. But I always remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama, something that he mentioned in a certain moment about the intelligent selfishness. Intelligent, selfish person, you will want to do everything for the other one because he knows. He knows because he's intelligent. However, he is selfish, that without that, he won't be able to benefit himself. And this clarity that we can access, right? With this simple observations of someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and among other ones. That's why I like citations. This clarity, it is very important because it brings us to where we are and to what we are, right? I don't want to bother you, but the Dalai Lama is behind you here. Here, there is a picture of him. We shows the master above our heads and speak, right? So now that I spoke so much, I will stop being selfish and I will turn the attention towards Enrique and appreciate so much Dr. David Loy and Sensei David Loy and all of you guys that cheered us with this beautiful presence. So the Lama said, thank you. So Enrique goes, I think that because of the time we got to our end here, we need to finish. I think from our part, we just need to appreciate, and besides saying that we are finishing, we are actually starting this cycle of reflections and deepen converse about everything that we just talked about. It. We are just opening up a door, a channel for us to for us to move on and just make these activities even deeper. So we are just starting in our social medias, Abby and all the social medias pages. We're able to find all the invitations, the titles of the activities, the places, the informations, and all the necessary information for us to subscribe ourselves and participate. Mostly of these activities will happen in a hybrid format. So for those that are not able to travel through for those that are not able to travel to the place, they are happening in presence. It's always possible for us to have a remote. So there is a lot of things to happen through these next weeks. So I would like to appreciate here and just say bye through my end. I don't know if the Lama would like to say. He's saying, I appreciate. The Lama says, feel so happy with this, what Henrique just said. We are starting, right? And we are very energized with this possibility for us to meet through this time and all these retreats that will happen here in Viamão and also in Porto Alegre. So there is this encounter that in the Federal University, which is the same place that His Holiness the Dalai Lama also presented himself at. So thank you so much, David. Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Nan, Hinshin. Thank you so much. And a hug for everybody. Like thank you so much for the translators. Thank you for we send hugs in Brazil. That's a cultural thing. So hugs for you all. Thank you so much and best wishes. So should we do the dedications, do you think? May the merits of these encounters to expand and touch all beings, master of the compassion, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, together with all the masters from all traditions that gives this message, may they have a long life, and may all beings safe from generating negative thoughts, the most negative obstacle. May these thoughts never appear in our minds, and may all beings free from negative thoughts. True.
Obrigado, pessoal.
Thank you so much, y'all. Okay, thank you, Professor. Bye-bye. Really nice being here. Thank you. Because we have a practice 5 in the morning in Brazil. People are appreciating. So.